All right, welcome into SportsLine here on News Channel 5 Plus. I'm Steve Layman. Glad to have you with us tonight here on the program. Our phone lines, as always, open 737-7767. Call us up. What are your thoughts? A lot of things going on today. World Cup, the most politically charged game of the World Cup so far. The U.S. and Iran over there in Doha, Qatar. Or I guess we're back to calling it Qatar. Doha, Qatar. And the U.S. able to win. Christian Pulisic with a gutsy goal in the first half. He paid the price for it, suffered an abdominal injury. He had to leave after halftime, go to the hospital to get checked out. Who knows what his status will be now for the knockout stage. But he gets his first World Cup goal and gets the U.S. through with that 1-0 win over Iran. A huge moment for U.S. soccer, a huge moment for Christian Pulisic, because he was part of the group in 2018 that could not get over the hump. He was the star. Everybody said he was going to be the next Landon Donovan or Michael Bradley or any of those types of guys. He was going to be that next guy, and he pretty much is. But in 2018, they could not qualify for the World Cup. It was a bitter disappointment for U.S. soccer as they kind of move into this next generation of stars. And for Christian Pulisic to come up on the biggest stage today in the World Cup and deliver that goal, monumental for him and obviously monumental for U.S. soccer too, because now they advance into the knockout stage. They'll take on the Netherlands Saturday morning, 9 o'clock Central Time, with an opportunity to get into the quarterfinals, and that would be obviously a monumental moment for U.S. soccer as well. It was an interesting day today because I thought the U.S. played its best half in Qatar in the first half. They came out, they were flying around, they were creating chances, probably could have had 2 or 3 goals in that first half. And as a matter of fact, Tim Way had a goal that was a beautiful run that was waved off for offsides, and VAR afterwards showed that he had, I don't know, a kneecap beyond the defender. I don't like what offsides has developed into in the international game. It used to be about daylight. You truly had to be beyond the last line of defense, the last defender, to be offsides. Now they're going into this machine that's breaking it down by frames and millicentimeters and all that sort of stuff to see that your kneecap's offsides. I don't know. I mean, that just, to me, takes away from the spirit of the rule and also the beauty of the game. That was a beautiful pass by Weston McKennie. It was a beautiful run by Tim Way. And Way put it away and would have given the U.S. a 2-goal lead, and instead it gets called back. And to me, that is anticlimactic. So I don't love that. I was disappointed by what I saw in the second half. I love the guts. I love the courage to put it away. But the U.S. was way too defensive in the second half as Iran turned up the heat because they needed a goal, because they needed at least a tie or a draw to be able to move on into the knockout stage themselves. And so with elimination, pressing, Iran pressed back. And the U.S., to me, felt like they fell back into a shell. I think all of Greg Berhalter's substitutions were a little bit mystifying. I don't know what he was doing up front in the second half, and ultimately he went to the 5-man defensive back line, bringing in Walker Zimmerman and Shaq Moore from Nashville SC to be on his defense at the end. Shaq was a little bit shaky at times. Zimmerman had his best performance in the World Cup. He was everywhere in a defensive fashion in the final several minutes of this game. He won every aerial ball, it seemed like, in the last 10 minutes as Iran was pressing forward. He was able to get up and win those balls. And most importantly, when Iran had a ball in the box, a little bit of contact there, they were trying to get the penalty call. I think it was correct to not have a call there. But the ball actually squirted through past the goalkeeper, and it's going towards the goal. It didn't have a lot of momentum there, but Zimmerman came over as the last line of defense and kicked it out of there. He was everywhere in the final few minutes and helped the U.S. hold on 1-0 and move on. England takes care of Wales, so they're in as well. But a big moment for U.S. soccer today to get that win. And in a larger stage, I mentioned the politically charged atmosphere. This is what sometimes international sporting events become. They become sort of a referendum on your country as a whole, and not just the team that's on the court or on the pitch in this case. And that's what today felt like. There's been so much emphasis on what's been going on in Iran and the murder of that young woman a few weeks back, and the protests to try to get more rights for all people over there, but certainly women right now. There's a lot of sticky stuff there, and there's politically sticky stuff between Iran and the U.S., and certainly the Americans have put their support behind the protesters, and who knows what's going to happen when the Iran football team comes back to Iran after the World Cup and everything that's gone on with that. It is a very, very precarious situation, and there was tension about it. But when you get to this place, and we've seen it before, 1998 is a good example. The last time these two teams played on the World Cup stage and Iran won, the supreme leader at the end said, I'm paraphrasing here, but essentially, look at that. Those bad guys from America got what was coming to them. And that's the thing that whenever you get in these stages, when you're playing a political or a national rival, you always want to put forth your best, not just in how you play, but in what your country's all about. And in a lot of ways, today's 90-plus minutes on the pitch there in Doha, Qatar, was American exceptionalism against the human rights atrocities and the regime in Iran. And for the U.S. to win, yes, it's big for U.S. soccer, first and foremost. It is a game, the beautiful game on the world stage. It's huge for that. But I think it's also big for the U.S. It is a morale win for the U.S., and it is another statement on the world stage for what U.S. is all about. They were outnumbered in the crowd there. Obviously, regionally, it's much closer to Iran, but huge differences between the people who are in the stadium with the red, white, and blue on and what they stand for and what's on the other side. And not all the people, obviously. I think we're all aware of the circumstances in Iran, that it's not the people who generally lead to these decisions. It's the establishment. It's the regime over there that have prevented women from having equal rights and committed human rights atrocities over the years and all of that. Today, the U.S. sent that country and that regime and that belief system home. And the U.S. moves on, and that's something to be celebrating, I think, tonight as well. Titans obviously coming off the loss to the Bengals on Sunday. We talked about that last night on Titans Talk. We could certainly talk about that again here tonight. Disappointing loss for sure. And I think now you get into December. Calendar turns in a couple of days. And this is the moment when you really start to find out who the true contenders are in the NFL. Who the true teams who can win in January will be. Historically under Mike Vrabel, historically with Derrick Henry in December and into January, this is when the Titans play their best. They find a way to ramp it up defensively. They find a way to run it down your throat. And they play good football at this time of year. They are beat up. They're missing some key guys. The running game has been absent for 3 weeks now. Can they do it again this year? There's real questions about that. But this is the time to do it. And we had the conversation last night based off of who the Titans have beaten and who they've lost to. What is your level of confidence in the Titans right now looking ahead to the playoffs? Because it seems pretty clear they're going to be there. The Colts lost again last night on Monday Night Football. Jaguars are way behind them. Texans are done. Titans are going to win the AFC South. But once they get into the playoffs, and they'll have a home game by winning the division, are they going to be favored against anybody? Can they line up and beat anybody in there consistently? Because they played the Chiefs and lost. They were right there. They had a chance, but they lost. They got blown out by the Bills. They lost at home to the Bengals this weekend. Again, right there, but they lost. They lost to the Giants earlier in the season. The only team with a winning record that the Titans have beaten to this point is the Commanders. Have they done enough in your mind to make you think that they can legitimately win games in the postseason? And maybe the better question is games plural, multiple games. Because home field advantage in game one, yeah, maybe they can sneak that out. Just like a play different on Sunday, they could have beaten the Bengals. Or a play different in Kansas City, they could have beaten the Chiefs. Could they maybe steal one with a game plan somewhere along the way? Maybe. But the thing is about the playoffs is you have to win week in and week out against good teams. And from the position the Titans are going to start from, and most teams in a 14-team playoff field, everybody but the 1 seed in the AFC and the NFC have to play 4 weekends. They got to win 4 games to win it all. And given the positions the Titans have been in recent years, that's the goal. It's not just getting to the playoffs. It's winning in the playoffs and becoming Super Bowl champion. Can the Titans do that? Is this roster prepared to go win those types of games? That's the million-dollar question, and we'll find out more answers starting with this weekend's trip to Philadelphia to take on the NFC-leading Eagles on Sunday at noon. Our phone lines are open tonight, 737-7767, if you'd like to chime in on that. Also, the second-to-last college football playoff ranking comes out tonight. Georgia still number 1, Michigan up to number 2 after the win over Ohio State. TCU is 3, USC up to 4, Ohio State 5, Alabama 6, Tennessee 7. So the Vols move up to 7. But given the positioning of those teams and the fact that Ohio State and Alabama and Tennessee are all now done in the regular season, it is basically impossible to see a scenario in which Tennessee gets into the playoff, no matter what happens amongst those top 4. Because I think if Georgia loses, Georgia's still getting in. I think if Michigan loses, Michigan's still getting in. If TCU loses, they might fall out. And if USC loses, it will fall out for sure. But the committee here, with no more games left for the teams outside of the top 4, has Ohio State number 5. So seemingly, if one of those teams in front of them go down, the Buckeyes are getting in. And with Alabama 6, it seems like the pecking order within the SEC would tell you that if multiple teams in the top 4 fall out, that it's going to be Ohio State and Alabama and not Tennessee. What do you think about that? Tennessee obviously got the head-to-head win on the final play of the game. Both teams have 10 wins, 2 losses. Tennessee's losses are to the number 1 team in the country in Georgia, and then a 4-touchdown loss at South Carolina. And to me, that's big. I think in the committee's mind, that is big. They do not like to see the so-called elite teams get crushed. And that's what happened to Tennessee that night. Now, I think there's another factor there, personally. This is not speaking for the committee, but for me, when Hendon Hooker went down, Tennessee was probably going to lose that game, but it wasn't going to be ugly. They were going to lose a shootout by a couple of touchdowns, it seemed like. Once he went down and the resulting touchdown, it was all over. And it just became a snowball, and they got really, really, really ugly. I don't think the final score was indicative of what the margin that night should have been before Hendon Hooker's injury. Did they take that into account? I don't know. But that's what you're looking at with Tennessee. Alabama doesn't have very many good wins, but it's got 2 losses essentially on the final play of the game. Actually, it was on the final play of the game. Ohio State's another one. Not a ton of great wins there. Did win at Penn State. Penn State's 8th. So it's got a nice win there. Got a couple other solid wins. Feels a little bit like Alabama. But for whatever reason, Ohio State's in front. How do you feel about where Tennessee is in the rankings? Do you think it's justified? And then the other factor that I do think you have to weigh in, it's unfortunate, but you do, is Tennessee the same team without Hendon Hooker? The answer on Saturday night against Vanderbilt was pretty impressive. Joe Milton did not play like Hendon Hooker, but Tennessee ran the ball effectively. He threw the ball well enough to do the job on a rainy night. And the Vols defense stepped up in a big way, and they win 56-0. It's hard to do any more than that. Talk about a bounce-back performance, and if there was any questions of how potent the offense could be without Hooker, that should have answered it. But I do think there is something to be said for losing a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback that isn't available, that probably holds Tennessee back in this discussion as well, at least from the committee's perspective. Your thoughts on that? Your thoughts on the Titans? Your thoughts on U.S. soccer today? Also, the Predators back in action tonight. No score against the Ducks, but finally on the ice after that weird weekend over at Bridgestone Arena with the water main rupture and the flooding of the event level. 2 different games had to be postponed. Predators finally back to work tonight against the Ducks. They've played 20 games, essentially a quarter of the season, and it can only be described as a disappointment so far, given what they've done. A lot higher expectations moving forward. Talking to some of the guys over the last couple of days, they believe the few days off were good for them. Gave them the time to get back to practice. Gave them the time to sort of reset after the quarter pole. And to get ready to go on a run here. Can they do that, and can they jumpstart it tonight with a win against the Ducks? We will find out in a couple of hours as this game plays out. Phone lines open, 737-7767, the number. This is SportsLine on News Channel 5+.